Hi everyone, today is Monday, July 23rd, and I'm currently filming from the global economic north. And I'm not sure what to call today's video, but it's going to be called something like calculating opportunity costs. And I just received some disturbing news that the African Canadian Legal Clinic in so-called Diversity Canada, which is also known as Ontario, Canada, I came to some information to say that the legal clinic has actually been closed. Now, one of the things that I've been working on in sort of working on my whole sort of like a package to, I don't want to out myself, I kind of want to leave things as a surprise, but I've just been working on some the development of like some academic things since I would probably say from about 1993. And I am very interested. I've always been interested in how to use different mechanisms to do also judicial problem solving. So, and when I say judicial problem solving, I just mean that referring to use of the judicial system to solve problems that people are experiencing. So I've always been interested in that since, it's got to be about 1993. And when I relocated to Central Canada from Western Canada, I began to realize that there is something very wrong with even certain structures that exist in order for one to become involved in using and accessing mechanisms where you can actually advocate for yourself. And I've worked on a lot of different issues, and one thing I try and encourage people to do is to not be intimidated by the process, but to empower yourself to be the advocate for yourself. And one of the things that I will say about the Canadian legal system, and I think just I'm starting to see some serious problems with even how, these so-called, I call them practitioners, and it says in the Canadian Charter that you actually don't need a legal person to speak for you. And I find that being in the most diverse community in Canada, and also interacting with a community that is the worst as far as every imaginable human rights, environmental deterioration, human trafficking, sex trafficking, murders, biomedical profiling, etc., etc. So working in that kind of demographic, I've really come to realize that it's really important to encourage people to speaking their own words and advocate for themselves, because one thing I'm finding with a lot of interactions with a lot of these so-called people that have gone through the process, that have passed standardized testing, and are able to complete their credentializing to become some kind of legal practitioner. One thing I realize is that when you actually sit down with these folk, they can't even paraphrase what you are actually going through. And second, when you actually formulate a position related to, you know, sort of trying to explain, okay, this is what happened to me, they have no way of even writing your soul into the documentation that will actually be presented, and also the presentation. So I have a lot of problems with these efforts that say, and also get very, very problematic when, even though you want to advocate for yourself, they sort of just shit on you, and they say, I guess I don't want to say too much because I'm leaving a lot of stuff for some books that I'm working on. But there is a problem with access to justice I'm starting with Ontario, Canada, and then I'm going to look at all the different provinces to see how different things are actually, how it actually works. And then I'm going to look at the Canadian infrastructure, and I did a lot of this when I was in my preliminary university studies, and I'm just in the process of processing my university like notes and documentation and organizing all that stuff. So I will definitely share more in subsequent videos. And one of the things that I was just reflecting on is, who do we have now to go to when it comes to accessing access to justice also in Canada? And I've always been interested in sort of going to whatever it is and presenting the problem, and also adjudicating towards a solution that is going to be mutually beneficial and not work to disempower the person seeking assistance. And I've always been interested in that. I remember I used to write a lot of letters when I was in my early teens, and I used to write these, like, I'd probably say response letters. When I was in my early teens, I used to do that for the neighbors and, you know, just like work on problems they were having, and I was very successful every time. So I just kind of evolved over the years, and then I had some life difficulties where I was dealing with like a lot of like colonization things and being impacted by that. So I had to sort of untangle myself out of what I could of that, and then I had to sort of reposition myself somewhere else where I could actually work on credentializing myself so that I have enough autonomy to do what I need to do and not be obstructed in the process. So I've shared some videos about how I've been racially profiled, and I'm also working on trying to sort of contribute to things where I can also be, you know, part of economic development in my current locale, which is in Canada as well as other places in the Caribbean. So I just wanted to show you, I've been working on trying to figure out a really good method to use to help me get through the organization of my ideas, the articulations of like different positions and sentence structure, and, you know, stuff related to how to make my writing also appeal in an authentic way to the reader. So I came across this book. I don't have a very good camera, but I'll show you. It's this book. It's called, let me try it this way, The Organic Entrepreneur. And it's actually called, the full title is The Organic Entrepreneur, Cultivating the Conscious Capitalist by Maxine Hyndman. And actually, when I saw her picture on her book, I thought to myself, that is awesome. You know, let me read her stuff and, you know, see what she talks about. And then on the other hand, as I have come to sort of walk this journey in life, I've realized that I have to be very careful with, you know, looking at certain things, because when you see a black face, that's not necessarily to say that that person is actually walking a specific ethic. So I also make sure that, you know, people are actually walking their talk. So she came up with this really good model, and it's even though she's talking about like a business aspect to sort of structure things, I thought to myself, you know, this model is actually really cute, and let me try and apply it to other things in my life. So racial profiling, to begin with, got in the way of me being able to test this model. I wanted to give myself about 5 years to work with the model to say, okay, you know what, this is what I'm going to use. And what had happened was racial profiling came to me, and it disturbed a lot of even the development of my academic materials. So I'm working on stuff where I am actually going to hold them accountable. I just want to do it myself. I don't need anybody speaking for me. It's like writing essays in university. I don't need some fucking idiot writing my stuff. And I don't appreciate somebody sort of spinning my stuff as their stuff either. So my apologies for that profanity, but I'm going to try and change that too, because when I listen to my videos, I'm like, I don't know if I like using those words, and, you know, it's different when you're actually in the moment of an expression versus the opposite way to see that expression. And then sometimes I say to myself, I don't like that. So I'm working on some things, and my videos are draft videos, and you know, I was just looking at some stuff, and I got this book. It was purchased November 2, 2011, and we're in 2018, so I should have been done my analysis of the particular model that she presents in this book. I should have been done in 2016, but I've been, I'm about 14 years behind in the development of my academic materials. Second, I've also reached out to different sort of intervention structures to figure out what is the best way forward. And you know, I just want to encourage people out there to never be intimidated by the system of justice, but in Canada as well. But I also find that they really need to just scrap this thing called a law school admission test. So I don't know if I should do another video about that, but I'm not sure what to call this video either. But I just wanted to share that I'm actually really disappointed to hear that the African Canadian Legal Clinic is now closed in Ontario. And coming from a place where you don't really see a lot of that diversity, I was just really amazed to even know that there was such a thing as like a black, you know, legal place that you could go to, because they could probably understand, you know, the issues that you're actually going through, and you don't have to, you know, feel bad about talking about stuff, or, try and talk a certain way to sound a certain way, or I just thought that it was cool to actually have a black-centric law clinic. So I don't even know why the Law Society of Upper Canada couldn't do something to help this legal clinic. The problem with this so-called thing called access to justice is that it's very segmented, and when you hear of some of these people, when they talk about like accomplishing some kind of job title or some kind of recognition title, but when you actually see the work that they do based on how they are able to paraphrase back to you and maybe even show you examples of like different situations they've dealt with, they are not the brightest people out there. And it's like, for me, when you're actually dealing with a client, especially when you're like dealing with like a very problematic situation, you have to be able to listen to the person actively, but you also have to be able to paraphrase. And I find that a lot of these legal practitioners, even like, I've come into like these black ones, and I'm just like, this person doesn't even know what the fuck I'm talking about. Like, how can you be black and then say to me, oh, you've never experienced racial profiling? Well, what the fuck are you doing working in, a center for people who, are trying to access solutions that have dealt with stuff like this? So it's just like, I say to myself, I just say to myself, like, I just didn't know that there were so many problems with a lot of things out in the world, and I just have to continue to sort of swim those waters. So Maxine Hyndman comes up with a really good model, and what she does is she breaks up a strategy into these different parts, and then what she does is she ties this model into understandings about nature. And I thought that was just the coolest thing, and I had these ideas, and I was just so gung-ho, and I was just so, really inspired and pumped and just really motivated to, move forward with this model when I first learned about it. And I want to say thank you to, I forget the name of the store. But I actually got it from her book, Maxine Hyndman's book, from this store that was located in downtown Toronto, close to the University of Toronto campus, by College Street and Spadina. I think it was called Harvard Street, and I forget the name of the place. And they have the coolest things about, women's spirituality. But at the time, the owner also had stuff that was relevant to black females. So that's where I got this book from, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And I don't know how I would have accessed this information, because when you even do internet searches about different things, all this shit and crap comes up that it's almost trying to sell to you this agenda to, sort of big up the supremacy of whiteness. Everything is Euro, everything is like white-centric, and I'm just like, this is bullshit. And then when you actually see like a person of color, you're like, yeah, okay, let me deal with that. But I'm sorry, I will not support the materials of people who look like me and is from my demographic that are writing shit to the black community. But at the same time, interacting in a way where they're bigging up their fucking Becky or whatever. So I don't do that kind of shit. What I do is I say to myself, you know what, I didn't even know black folk were, like, I don't know how you could even want to reproduce biologically with the thing that was a part of lynching your nuts. And then, you have the flip side of stuff where you have, like, these black women and, like, their thinking is really fucked up. Like, to talk about, how it's great to have their white man. And I'm like, are you actually an educated person, or are you actually one of those house Negroes? Because I don't know how you could actually fuck the thing that actually lynched you. So, on the other hand, there's some things that I've been thinking about, some things that I've been sampling, and I just wanted to say that I'm really sorry that the African Canadian Legal Clinic is now closed. I don't know why I didn't hear about it, if they had some kind of strategy to reach out to people. But one thing I find about a lot of these, like, black organizations is that even though I am happy, oh my gosh, I just get very, very excited when I see something black. On the other hand, if I see a fucking white woman there and I hear that she's part of the ownership and also commercializing black stuff, I want no part of it. And I will go on my database and say, stay the fuck away from this place because of so-and-so. And it's not just, things in terms of a black-white dichotomy, but if you are a black male and you are cohabitating with something that is not a black female, and you're making money off the black community, for me, that's not ethical, that's very problematic, and that's enough for me to say, fuck you, I want nothing to do with you. So all of those guys and this stupid, I don't know, assimilationist bullshit stuff, like, I don't want anything to do with them. So I noticed with a lot of these black, like, places in also, different parts that I've been to, different travels, different parts of Canada and other places, I have to be very careful because, even, like, it's crazy because, like in Ontario, Canada, like, I've put up, like, all these videos, over hundreds of them about, different problems in Ontario, Canada. But it's not just speaking about Ontario, but it's just speaking about, like, just things that I see that are really unusual. And so, I'm really sorry that this African Canadian legal clinic in Ontario closed. And what I actually wanted to do was I wanted to finish my advanced studies in law and then actually become a practitioner with one of those types of clinics where I could also be there and make it known that I work on only these cases and that's it, nothing else. So I know I may be talking generic, and I want to share the ideas as well with folk, but on the other hand, I have to just sort of tweak things a little bit so that I come across as being very clear. So I'm really sorry to hear that about the African Legal Clinic. I know some of these black people these black folk that, get a little bit of accomplishment. Like even today I was, just outside talking to somebody, and I saw this black woman walk by, and she looked like she was a woman from Jamaica. And she looked at me, and she had her hair all braided up, and it was all like, whatever. And, she had kind of a, a disposition to her. And she looked at me, and she looked at me with this really dirty look. And I thought to myself, I wanted to say to her, let me tell you something. You don't need to look at people like that. Have some fucking respect. You and I are no different from each other. So if you look at somebody like me, fix your fucking face and say hello. And you know what this bitch did? She went and she said hi to all the white people, but she looked down on me like I was a piece of shit. So I was just like, you know what? I need to learn more about even how this whole, I don't know what to call it, but I call it a kind of like dysfunctional thing, how it works even coming from Jamaica. And you know, the thing is that like some people are like, oh, you know, you have to speak Jamaican to be Jamaican. But on the other hand, you have these stupid white women and they like, you know, and I focus on the black-white dichotomy. It gets worse when you get to like Asian women and India women and Arab women and Hispanic women, you know, these stringy-haired people. Like, it gets worse. So I just focus on sort of that black-white dichotomy. And this bitch, I was, you know, gonna say to her, like, she was older than me, but I was gonna say to her, you need to fix your fucking face and don't look at people like that. And she had her bottom cock up and, you know, she's wearing like this thing like she's some kind of nurse or whatever. And I noticed one thing is that when you have a lot of these like people from, you know, the Caribbean, and I'm also of Caribbean descent as well, they look at you, they size you up, they want to know, you know, what you do, what kind of money you have, and I don't know why they behave like that, because for me, when I see another black person, and I come from a place where, you know, I learned a lot about how people can be really dehumanized. I come to a place where I see black folk and I'm like, wow, what the fuck is wrong with them? Is that really, you know, is that really like a person colonized by colonization? So there's these different variables that I have to deal with and certain things that I see. So I just wanted to say that I'm really sorry for, you know, the closure of the African Legal Clinic. I think that was a really good idea, and I remember I contacted them years ago to find out a little bit more about how I could also develop some kind of mentorship with them and align, you know, the development of my studies also with, you know, some kind of legal entity that actually works to benefit the situation of black folk that are experiencing also legal abuses. So I'm really sorry to hear about that. You know, I don't know what happened. Like, was there a problem with management? I don't know why the Law Society of Canada couldn't intervene and say, okay, you know what, this is bullshit. Let's just clean this shit up. Because one thing I've noticed is that when it comes to certain organizations, and it's not just black organizations, but it seems like people have an issue with power dynamics in Ontario. In Alberta, it's very different. Like, you know, you have to sort of present yourself in a way where you're actually authentic. And people will see different things about you in Alberta, and then they'll just come up to you and say, oh, have you thought about this? And, you know, oh, nice hair, or whatever they'll say. But they're actually very genuine out there. Here in Ontario, Canada, there's this huge problem. Everybody's fighting with each other, and, you know, I'm just really sorry to hear about that, and I really hope that the Law Society of Canada does something to revive the African Canadian Legal Clinic or a black-centric legal clinic, because the Law Society of Canada could also use that data to also facilitate, you know, different strategic directions. So whether it be, you know, having their policy team petition the government for, you know, different types of recognition or, you know, compensation, I don't know. But I don't know why the Law Society of Canada didn't intervene and say enough is enough. So I think I might even fire off a letter to the Law Society of Upper Canada. I just want to try and understand a little bit more what happened with the African Canadian Legal Clinic. And one thing I've noticed in Ontario is that, you know, a lot of black folk, you know, are sort of like these, they just kind of do. And a lot of them are like, it's like they have no morals, they have no ethics, and they're desperate. So, you know, they'll talk all kinds of shit. And they won't even like stop and say, look, what the hell am I doing here? Right? What are my principles? What are my ethics? You know, how am I moving forward? Blah, blah, blah. They don't do any of that. They just continue to go, and then you know what? They end up dead. So, they also